There are nights when the blankets are warm and the mind keeps walking the same circle anyway. If that is your night, you do not have to solve it to rest. Tonight we stay with one life, the story of Moses, who spent 40 years in the wilderness and learned that God does not leave. If your heart is willing, share one prayer request tonight in the comments or in your own heart, and we will hold it before God together. The word God gave Moses is for you now. My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. You can let your eyes close whenever they are ready. The story will keep watch, and nothing more will be asked of you. Let us pray. Father, come near to this tired heart. Loosen what the day made tight. Quiet the thoughts that keep walking, and let this listener lie down knowing that your presence goes with them into the dark and stays until morning. Give the deep rest that only you can give. In Jesus' name, Amen. The story of Moses. Exodus chapter 2. Every long night has a beginning, and this one begins beside a river, with a mother who could not keep her secret hidden any longer, and a basket small enough to hold a child's whole future. Let your body settle now the way that baskets settled into the reeds, carried, held, kept safe by hands too gentle to be seen. This is the story of how a deliverer entered the world hidden, saved by water instead of lost to it, kept alive through the quiet courage of women who feared God more than they feared any king. And it begins so small that almost no one was watching. There is a kind of beginning that makes no noise at all, no trumpet, no announcement, only a woman kneeling among the reeds before the sun was fully up, and a God already at work in a story nobody had yet noticed. Let that be your comfort as you settle into the pillow. The quiet places of your life are not the empty places, and God is not less near to you tonight for being unseen. In the land of Egypt, in the years when the children of Israel had grown numerous and a fearful king had ordered their sons destroyed, a certain man and woman of the house of Levi kept a secret in their home. And there went a man of the house of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. 3 months of held breath, 3 months of muffled crying in the dark, 3 months of a mother doing the impossible work of keeping a whole small life invisible. If you have ever held something precious close and quiet, afraid of what the world might do if it knew, you already understand the ache inside that hiding. But 3 months can only hide a growing child for so long. And the day came when the mother's arms were not enough to keep him safe any longer. And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. Picture her kneeling at the water's edge in the grey hour before the world woke, weaving reeds into a small vessel, sealing every seam with her own careful hands, because there was no other shelter left to give him. It was not abandonment. It was the bravest kind of trust, placing what she loved most into the current, believing that the God who made the river could also be trusted to carry what floated on it. She did not simply set the basket adrift and walk away. She left a watcher behind, and his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. A sister, likely still a child herself, stationed quietly among the reeds, keeping her eyes on the small floating ark, while her heart surely pounded with every ripple that touched it. There is a tenderness in this detail that is easy to miss in the retelling. Even in the moment of greatest risk, this family did not simply hope and hide their faces. They watched. They stayed near as they dared, ready to act the moment a door opened. Love does that. It stays within sight of what it cannot control. If there is someone tonight you have had to release into a current you cannot steer, take a small comfort from a girl standing quietly among those reeds. Watching over what you love is not the same as failing to save it. And God is watching with you, nearer to that water than you could ever get. And then the door opened, though not in any way the family could have arranged or predicted. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. Of all the people who might have found that basket, it was found by the one household in Egypt, with both the power to save the child and the standing to protect him openly, the very house that had ordered such children destroyed. This is how God so often works, not by removing us from danger's own doorstep, but by turning the danger itself into the doorway of rescue. The princess opened the little basket, and what she found there undid her. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept, and she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." He wept, this small hidden child, and his crying reached a heart that no decree had hardened. Compassion moved faster than fear, faster than politics, faster than every wall his people had built against her people. God can soften the very heart that seems least likely to bend, and he did it here with nothing more than the honest cry of a frightened baby. Your own tears are not wasted either. They are not weakness, and they are not noise. The same God who let one infant's crying reach across an empire and open a royal heart still hears the quiet weeping that no one else in your house knows about. Nothing you have cried in the dark has ever fallen to the ground unheard. Now the sister stepped forward, brave and quick, with a plan already forming. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. Imagine that walk home, the sister running to fetch her own mother and calling her a stranger's nurse, and the mother's disbelief as she was led back to the very river she had wept beside that morning. now summoned to nurse her own son in the light of day, under royal protection instead of royal decree. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away, and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. The very mother who had hidden him for 3 months, who had wept over a basket of reeds, was paid by a princess to raise her own son. What looked that morning like the end of every hope, God had already turned into provision, protection, and wages besides. This is what it means to trust a river you cannot see the end of. You do not know when you let go that the current is already carrying your child towards safety rather than away from it. But it can be, and it often is, more than we dare to ask. Sit with the shape of that morning for a moment before we go on. A mother who had run out of every option. A daughter of a hostile house who did not have to look twice and looked anyway. A sister with the courage to speak first. God gathered all of it into one small rescue, and not one of them could see the whole of it while it was happening. That is usually how it is. You almost never get to watch the pieces come together from above. You are given your own part, the basket you can weave, the words you can say, the letting go you can manage, and then you wait to see what God will do with what you have handed him. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, Because I drew him out of the water, drawn out of the water. That was his very name, spoken over him before he could understand it. A lifelong reminder stitched into the sound of his own identity that he had been pulled from danger by a hand that meant him no harm. Whatever waters you feel yourself carried through tonight, uncertain and unable to see the shore, know that the God who kept one small basket afloat on the Nile has not grown weaker and has not grown less attentive in all the years since. He still draws his own out of the water. He still watches from the reeds. Let that be the resting thought at the close of this first movement of the story, and let your breathing slow to match it. There's a long, quiet stretch in every calling before it becomes visible, a stretch that can feel like being forgotten rather than being formed. Moses grew up inside a palace and then lost it all in a single afternoon. And what followed was not swift restoration, but 40 slow years of tending sheep in a wilderness no one else was watching. If some part of your own life feels unfinished, hidden, or delayed far past what you hoped, let this stretch of the story sit close to you tonight. Nothing was wasted in those hidden years, though Moses could not have told you so at the time. He was alone in the desert. He would one day lead a whole nation across. He was learning patience with sheep long before he was asked for patience with people. He was becoming a man who could be trusted with a promise, and it was happening on days that felt like nothing at all. Your own slow season may be doing quieter work in you than you are able to see from inside it. Moses grew to manhood inside the very palace that had once ordered his people destroyed. And one day, the two halves of his life collided. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brethren. Something in him broke open at the sight, the ache of a man who belonged, by blood, to the very people being crushed around him. And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. It was rash, and it was violent, and it was born of a love for his people that had nowhere safe to go. Even good instincts, acted on too soon and in our own strength, tend to unravel quickly. The very next day, hoping perhaps to be received now as a deliverer, he found only suspicion and fear. And when he went out the second day, behold, two men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me, as thou killedst the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known. In one day he had gone from prince to fugitive, and the very people he had risked everything to defend turned on him with the sharpest words of all. It is a hard thing to be misunderstood by your own, but it is often the very hinge on which God moves us out of the place we were never meant to stay. Rejection has a way of closing a door we would have kept propped open forever. It hurts, and the hurt is real, and still it can turn out to be one of the kindest things that ever happens to a life. Some doors have to shut all the way before we will ever turn and look toward the one God is quietly opening somewhere else. And the word reached the throne, as such words always do, and the threat became immediate and mortal. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well, from a palace to a well in the middle of nowhere, in the space of a single flight. He sat down there, this once prince, with nothing left of his old life but the clothes on his back, and waited to see what a stranger's God might do with a man who had nothing left to offer but himself. At that well, ordinary kindness became the doorway into an entirely new life. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. He had lost his title, his home, and his standing, and yet the instinct to defend the vulnerable was still exactly where it had always been. Only now it moved quietly, without violence, in service instead of in fury. Sometimes God has to strip away our platform before he can purify the very same heart that once acted in the wrong strength, so that it can finally act in the right one. The daughters carried the story home, and their father's welcome became the shape of the next 40 years. And when they came to Reuel their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock. And he said unto his daughters, And where is he? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. Call him, that he may eat bread. Such a plain, warm sentence. And yet it was the first table Moses had been welcomed to since he lost everything. God so often rebuilds a broken life first around a simple meal, a simple welcome, an ordinary household willing to make room. If you are the one at the table tonight who feels like a guest in your own life, hear that welcome spoken again. Come and eat. There was room for a stranger with no name worth mentioning and no story he wanted to tell. And there is room in the same way for you. And Moses was content to dwell with the man. And he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and she bare him a son. And he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land, a stranger in a strange land. He named his own son after his exile, refusing to pretend the loss had not happened, and yet building a home and a family in the very place that loss had carried him to. 40 years he lived this way, tending another man's flock across the same quiet hills, learning the wells and the grazing paths and the long silences of the wilderness that would, though he could not have known it yet, become the very ground of everything that followed. 40 years is a long time to be faithful to something small. There were no crowds in Midian, no record kept of the mornings he rose before the light to move a flock toward water, no one writing any of it down. And yet everything that came later, the long marches, the thirst, the patience with a complaining people, the knowledge of where a road runs and where it gives out, was quietly being laid down inside him during those unremarkable years. God is rarely in a hurry, and he almost never wastes a season. What feels to you like a holding pattern may in fact be the training ground, and you will only recognize it from much further along the road. Through all those slow years, something else was happening far away, unseen by Moses, but never unseen by God. And it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of the bondage, and they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. He was not idle in the waiting, not for Moses, and not for the people still groaning under bondage in Egypt. Every sigh reached him. Every tear was heard. If your own years have felt hidden and unproductive, know that the God who remembered an old covenant while a shepherd tended sheep in obscurity has not lost track of a single sigh you have breathed either. He is working quietly underneath the surface of the waiting, exactly as he was working then. 40 years is long enough for a man to stop expecting anything new to happen to him And that is often exactly the hour God chooses to speak. Moses was doing the smallest, most repeated task of his whole quiet exile, walking a flock across familiar ground, when the ordinary desert in front of him became, for a few minutes, the holiest place he would ever stand. You do not have to be doing anything remarkable for God to meet you tonight. You only have to be where you are. He is not waiting for you to become more impressive before He draws near. He came to a man with a stick in his hand and dust on his feet, on a route he had walked 100 times before without anything at all happening. So let go of the idea that you must arrange something first. The bed you are lying in is enough. The tiredness you brought here is enough. Be where you are and let Him come to you there. It began as a day like every other day in that long, hidden stretch of years. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. He had walked this ground before, most likely, without a second thought. But this time, something at the edge of his sight refused to behave the way fire behaves. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Fire that did not consume. A burning that cost the bush nothing. It is a strange and gentle picture of God Himself, blazing with holiness, and yet never destroying the small, ordinary thing He chooses to fill. Moses did what any of us might do, drawn by simple curiosity towards something that did not add up. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. He turned aside. He did not have to. He could have kept walking, kept to his familiar path, let the strange light pass unexamined the way we let so many strange and holy things pass unexamined in our own busy lives. But he turned aside, and that single small choice to look more closely was the door through which the whole rest of his life walked in. Turning aside always costs something. It costs the schedule, the errand, the momentum of a day already half spent. And yet almost every deep thing God has ever given a person came just after a small willingness to stop and look. Tonight, you have already turned aside. You have stopped. That is enough of a beginning. The moment God saw that Moses had turned to look, He spoke, and the desert became a meeting place. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I, here am I. Two plain words, offered without hesitation, the same words a servant gives a master or a child gives a parent who has called their name in the dark. There was no argument yet, no bargaining, only presence, only availability. Before anything else was asked of him, this much was given, and it may be the truest posture any of us can offer God at the start of anything new. Simply, here I am. Then came an instruction that turned the ordinary desert floor into holy ground, simply because of who was standing on it. And he said, Draw not nigh hither. Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. It was not the sand itself that had changed. It was the nearness of God to that particular patch of it. Wherever His presence rests, however plain the ground beneath it looks, becomes ground worth removing your shoes for, worth slowing down for, worth treating with reverence rather than rushing past. Take your own shoes off for a moment in your mind and feel how ordinary the ground of your life is. A kitchen, a hallway, a room with the light off and one window slowly going dark. None of it looks holy. Neither did that stretch of desert until God stood upon it. Holiness is not a quality a place holds on its own. It is what happens to a place when He arrives, and He has arrived in rooms far plainer than yours. Wherever you are lying tonight is ground worth treating gently, because He is already there, and He was there before you noticed. And then God named Himself, not as a stranger, but as the very God this family already knew. Moreover, He said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. He hid his face, overwhelmed, and rightly so, for this was no new deity introducing itself, but the same faithful God who had walked with his ancestors for generations, now stepping directly into his own quiet, unremarkable life. The God who spoke to Abraham under the stars and wrestled with Jacob by the river was the same God now speaking from an ordinary desert shrub to a runaway shepherd. He had not changed. He had simply drawn near. And that same God told Moses plainly what he had seen and what he meant to do about it. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. I have surely seen, I have heard their cry, I know their sorrows. Notice how personally God speaks of their suffering, not as a distant report, but as something He has witnessed and felt and carried. If you feel unseen in your own hard season tonight, hear this again. He surely sees, He surely hears, He knows. Then came the call itself, and with it, the honest fear of the man being called. Come now, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I? It is one of the oldest, most human questions in all of Scripture, and God did not answer it by praising Moses or listing his qualifications. He simply said, Certainly I will be with thee. The call was never about the size of Moses. It was always about the nearness of the one who sent him. And it is the very same answer given to every uncertain heart who has ever asked that same question in the dark. One question remained, the deepest one of all, and God's answer to it has echoed to every generation since. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. I am that I am. Not I was, not I will be, but I am, present and unchanging, before every sorrow you have ever carried, and after every one still to come. He is not a God who arrives late to your night or leaves early from your morning. He simply is, always, right now, as near to you in this quiet room as he was to one shepherd standing barefoot before a bush that would not burn away. Let that name settle over you like the last warm light before sleep, and rest inside it. Even after the holy name, even after the promise of presence, Moses still hesitated, and God did not scold him for it. Instead, he met the doubt with something Moses could hold in his own two hands. There is patience here worth resting in tonight. The patience of a God who answers our fear not with impatience, but with proof gentle enough for tired, doubting hearts to receive. We tend to assume that doubt disqualifies us, that if we were really trusting, we would not need anything at all to hold on to. But look at how God handled a hesitant man. No lecture, no withdrawal of the call, only a question about what was already in his hand, and then something he could see with his own eyes. If your faith tonight feels thinner than you would like it to be, you are not being measured against somebody else's certainty. You are being met patiently, exactly where your trust actually is. The doubt came first, honest and unhidden. And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice. For they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee. He was not refusing God. He was simply afraid of standing before his own people with nothing to show for a conversation only he had witnessed. It is a fear many of us know, the fear of speaking a true thing and having no one believe it came from anywhere but our own tired imagination. God's answer was not an argument. It was a sign, ordinary and strange all at once. And the Lord said unto him, What is that in thine hand? And he said, A rod. And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. A shepherd's plain walking stick, the very tool of his ordinary hidden years, became in an instant something Moses himself was afraid of. God so often works this way, taking the small familiar thing already in our hand and turning it briefly into something we do not recognize, so that we learn it was never really about the stick at all. It is a strange mercy that God will sometimes unsettle the most familiar thing we own, the work we always knew how to do, the role we always filled without thinking about it. He lets it change shape in front of us so that our confidence moves off the thing and onto Him. The staff was never the power. it was only ever the place where the power became visible. And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thine hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand, and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee. The same hand that recoiled in fear was told, gently but plainly, to reach out again. And when it obeyed, the frightening thing became once more the familiar staff he had carried for 40 quiet years. Courage in Scripture so often looks exactly like this, reaching toward the very thing that frightens you, because the God who commands the reaching is the same God who steadies the hand. You do not have to feel brave in order to reach. Moses did not. He had already run once that day, and his hand was very likely still unsteady when he put it out. Courage is not the absence of the shaking. It is the reaching anyway, at the word of a God who has never once asked for something without also supplying it. A second sign followed, quieter and stranger still, given without being asked for. And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, Put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it was turned again as his other flesh. Sickness and healing, both worked in the very same hand, both within the space of a single breath. God was showing Moses in the most personal way possible that the power to wound and the power to restore both belonged entirely to him, and that neither was beyond his reach for even a moment. Even with two signs given, Moses raised one more honest objection, the deepest one yet. And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech, and of a slow tongue. He named his own weakness plainly, the very thing that felt most disqualifying to him. And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. The God who formed every mouth that has ever spoken was not asking Moses to be eloquent on his own. He was asking him to go and promising to supply in the very moment of speaking whatever the moment required. Notice what God did not say. He did not tell Moses that he was more eloquent than he thought. He did not flatter the weakness away or explain to the man that he was wrong about himself. He simply took the weakness as it stood and set his own presence beside it. I will be with thy mouth. That is a different kind of comfort than being told you are enough. And it is a far steadier one, because it does not rest on you being right about yourself. Whatever you cannot do tonight, and there may be a long list of it, you are not being asked to become somebody else before morning. You are asked only to go on, with God near to the weakest part of you, Even then Moses asked to be excused, and this time God's patience gave way to something closer, not anger exactly, but a determination to carry him forward anyway. And he said, "O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send." And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee, and when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart." Even in that flash of holy frustration, God's response was provision, not abandonment. He gave Moses a brother to stand beside him, because the calling was never meant to be carried by one set of trembling hands alone. It is worth resting on that last detail before we go on. When he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. God did not only supply a voice for the work, he supplied gladness, a brother who would be happy to see him coming after all those long years away. Sometimes the help God sends is practical, and sometimes it is simply somebody whose face changes when you walk into the room. Both are provision. Both come from him. If there is even one person tonight who is glad that you exist, that is not merely a piece of good fortune. It was given to you. And thou shalt take this rod in thine hand, wherewith thou shalt do signs. The very staff that had once seemed so ordinary, the plain wooden companion of 40 hidden years, went with him now as the visible sign of an invisible calling. Whatever plain, unremarkable thing rests in your own hand tonight, your ordinary days, your small responsibilities, your quiet, unnoticed faithfulness, God is not above using it. He took a shepherd's staff and made it the instrument of a nation's deliverance. He can do something with what is already in your hand too, if you are willing, like Moses, to simply go. Not every part of this story is gentle to tell before sleep, so we will walk through this next stretch softly, without lingering on its harder edges. Moses did go before Pharaoh, again and again, and a long season of hard signs and a harder heart passed between them, and all of that is told fully elsewhere for whoever wishes to read it slowly by daylight. What matters most for tonight is where that long season finally ended, at a door with a mark of blood and a quiet promise that whoever rested behind that mark would be kept safe. There is a kindness in the way the story is shaped here. After all the noise and all the hardness, the deliverance itself came to a household at night, indoors, with the family gathered and the door shut and a supper on the table, in a home, in the dark, while everyone simply stayed put. If you think God works mainly in dramatic places, let this movement correct it gently. He is very much at work in ordinary rooms where people are simply trying to get through the night. Before the long season of signs began, God gave Moses the shape of what was coming and the reason behind it. And the Lord said unto Moses, See, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Thou shalt speak all that I command thee, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, that he send the children of Israel out of his land. Moses was not sent to overpower a king by his own strength. He was sent to speak faithfully and repeatedly the words God gave him, and to let the outcome rest entirely in hands far greater than his own. There is rest in that division of labor, if you are willing to take it. Moses was responsible for the speaking. God was responsible for the outcome. It sounds simple, and it is one of the hardest things any of us actually manages, because we would so much rather hold both halves at once. We want to say the right thing and also govern what it does after it leaves us. Tonight, you can lay the second half down, the result of the conversation you have been dreading, the words you finally said out loud, the thing you asked for and are still waiting to hear about, is not yours to carry into sleep. You did your part. Let him carry the rest of it while you rest. Pharaoh's heart did not soften easily, and the season that followed was long and heavy, sign after sign, refusal after refusal, told in full elsewhere in the story of Exodus for those who wish to read every page of it. What matters most for our purposes tonight is simply this, that through all of it, God was making himself known, patiently and unmistakably, to a people who did not yet know him. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretch forth mine hand upon Egypt, and bring out the children of Israel from among them. Even in judgment, his deeper purpose was always to be known, to be recognized, to be trusted, rather than merely feared. That is his aim with you as well. Not to frighten you into obedience, but to be known, truly known, the way a person is known and not merely believed in from a distance. Every hard thing in this story bends toward that end. He wants a people who recognize his voice, and he is patient enough to keep speaking until they do. At the very end of that long season came one final night, and God gave his people one simple instruction for their own safety inside it. They were told to take the blood of a lamb and mark their doorways with it, a small, plain act of obedience that would matter more than anything else they owned. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you, when I smite the land of Egypt. A token, not a wall, not a weapon, just a mark of trust placed where anyone passing by could see it. Proof that this household believed the word of the Lord enough to act on it. It cost them something to mark that door, and it made them visible. Trust often does. But notice that the mark was not a work they invented in order to earn their safety. It was given to them, described to them, provided for them, and all they did was believe it enough to put it where it belonged. Think for a moment of what that night must have been like inside those houses. The door marked, the meal eaten standing up, the children quiet or not quiet, the family listening to the sounds outside with nothing left to do but trust the word they had been given. There was no way to check whether the promise would hold. They simply stayed inside it and waited for the morning. That is very close to what faith asks of us in the small hours. Not activity, not certainty, only staying inside the promise until the light comes, and the promise held for every house that obeyed it, without exception, without partiality. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the 2 side posts, the Lord will pass over the door, and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. Notice how simply safety came, not through strength or cleverness or standing, but through trusting the mark God himself had provided and resting quietly behind it while the long night passed outside. There is a picture here worth carrying gently into your own sleep tonight, of a household made safe, not by anything they had done, but by a covering placed there for them in mercy, trusted and rested under rather than earned. Rest is not usually the absence of danger. It is the presence of a covering. That is worth saying slowly, because so much of our sleeplessness comes from trying to make ourselves entirely safe before we will allow ourselves to lie down. The households that slept that night did not sleep because the night was harmless. They slept because something had been placed between them and the night, and it had been placed there by God himself. You have a covering too. You did not make it, and you cannot lose it by being tired. By morning, that long, hard season had finally broken, and the people who had groaned so long under bondage were told at last to go. It came suddenly, after years of waiting, the way long-held prayers so often are answered, not gradually but all at once, on a single ordinary morning that turned out to be the hinge of an entire nation's story. What had felt for so long like a door that would never open, opened. What had felt like a night that would never end, ended. If you are waiting tonight on the far side of your own long season, let this be a small, steady comfort. The God who marked one door in mercy and kept every promise behind it has not changed the way he keeps his word. Doors do open, nights do end, not always on the schedule we would have chosen, and not always in the shape we were expecting. But the God who has never once broken a promise is still keeping every one he has made to you. Let that be the thought you carry down into sleep from this part of the story. Freedom did not mean the fear was over. Only days into their journey, the people found themselves trapped between a hostile army behind them and a wide, impassable sea ahead. And in that narrow, frightening place, Moses spoke one of the gentlest and most surprising instructions in the whole of Scripture. Not fight, not run, simply stand still. That instruction runs against everything a frightened body wants to do. Fear wants motion. It wants a plan, a list, a way out drawn up before the eyes are allowed to close. And into all of that urgency comes a word asking for the opposite: stand still. Not because the trouble is imaginary, and not because nothing ever needs doing, but because there are hours when the only useful thing is to stop moving long enough for God to act. Tonight may well be one of those hours for you. There's nothing you can usefully do at this time of night except be still and be kept. The people looked behind them and saw only danger closing in, and their courage failed exactly the way ours so often fails, in the narrow place between what has already happened and what has not happened yet. Into that panic, Moses spoke words that must have sounded, at first, almost impossible to obey. And Moses said unto the people, "Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. Stand still, not because there was nothing to fear, but because the deliverance was already on its way, and no amount of frantic movement on their part could hurry it or improve it." Think of how much of your own tiredness comes from that exact thing, from trying to hurry something that was never yours to hurry. Turning the same problem over at midnight has never once solved it. Standing still is not laziness, and it is not giving up. Sometimes it is the most obedient thing a worn-out person can possibly do. Notice as well what he promised them about the fear itself. The thing that had been chasing them would not chase them forever. There is an end to it, he told them, and you will live to see it. That is not always how it feels in the middle of a frightening season, when a worry seems to have taken up permanent residence, and we can no longer picture a version of our life without it. But fears do have ends, most of them, and the ones that do not are still not stronger than the God standing between you and them. What is pressing so hard on you tonight will not press forever. And then came the promise that so many frightened hearts have leaned on ever since, in every generation that has felt trapped between an old fear behind them and an impossible way ahead. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. The Lord shall fight for you. Not you must fight harder. Not you must find your own way through. He shall fight for you, and your part in that fearful moment was simply to hold your peace, to let your racing heart quiet enough to trust the one already moving on your behalf. That same fighting, that same peace offered in exchange for frantic effort is held out to you again tonight. It is an exchange, and it is a generous one. You hand over the striving, and you receive back a quiet you could never have manufactured on your own. Nobody sleeps their way out of a real danger by pretending it is not there. But you can lay a real danger down in front of a God who has already taken it up, and then sleep because he has it. Hold your peace. It is a beautiful old phrase, and it does not mean pretend to be calm. It means stop arguing your case. Stop rehearsing the defense. Stop explaining to yourself over and over in the dark exactly why the situation is impossible. The people at the edge of that water had every reason to talk, and they talked a great deal, and God did not hold it against them. He simply told them kindly that they could stop now, because the matter was already being handled by somebody else. You may stop now too. Then the impossible happened, exactly as it had been promised, in full view of a whole trembling nation. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. All that night. It did not happen in an instant, dramatic and sudden, but through the long hours of one entire night, a wind that did not tire, working steadily while the people watched and waited, and, we can only imagine, slept very little themselves. God's great deliverances are so often like this, worked steadily through hours we cannot see, so that by morning the impossible has simply, quietly become true. Much of what God does for us is done at night, while we are not watching. That wind blew for all those hours over the water, and nobody had to supervise it. Whatever you cannot fix before you fall asleep is not therefore unattended. He works through the night. He always has. You are permitted to stop watching for a while and let him work. And in the morning, the people walked through on ground that should never have been dry, with walls of water standing where there should have been nothing but drowning. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Dry ground in the very middle of what had been, only hours before, an uncrossable sea. This is what God can do with the very thing that looks, from where you are standing tonight, like the end of the road. He does not always remove the sea from your path. Sometimes he simply makes a way straight through the middle of it and asks you only to walk. There's one more quiet detail here worth carrying to bed. They walked. After all the waiting, after a whole night of wind, the deliverance still had to be walked through, step after ordinary step, with water standing on either side and nothing to do but keep going and trust the ground. God rarely carries us over our troubles in a way that asks nothing of us. He makes the way and then invites us to take it, one plain step at a time, which is usually all that anybody can manage anyway. Tomorrow will only ever ask you for tomorrow's steps. By the time the sun was fully up, the danger that had chased them for days was behind them for good, and the wide, once impossible sea lay calm and ordinary again, as though it had never parted at all. What had felt the night before like the very last narrow place, the place where the story would surely end, turned out instead to be the place where the story opened wide. Stand still, he still says, to every heart pressed into its own narrow place tonight, between the fear behind and the impossible ahead. He is already fighting. The sea is already parting, even if you cannot yet see the dry ground beneath your feet. Let your body rest as still as that instruction asks, and let the rest be his to carry. Deliverance is one kind of miracle. Daily bread is another, quieter kind, and God did not let his people go hungry for even one day in the long wilderness that followed. If your own worry tonight is less about a great crisis and more about tomorrow's ordinary needs, this next part of the story was written with exactly that kind of tired heart in mind. Great rescues make the better stories, but it is the daily kind of care that actually keeps a person alive. Bread on an ordinary morning, water in a dry place, a need met so quietly that you very nearly forget it was ever a need at all. God is not less present in the small provisions than He was in the parted sea, and He is very often more present there, because that is where most of our living is done. Let the ordinary mercies of your own life come gently to mind as we go on, and let them be counted. The very first trouble on the far side of the sea was not an army, but simple thirst, and it came quickly. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. 3 days without water is a long, frightening stretch. And when water finally appeared, it was bitter, undrinkable, a cruel disappointment after so much thirst. The people murmured against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" It is such an honest cry, the cry of exhausted people who had just watched a sea part and still could not quiet the very present ache of an unmet need. There is no shame in that. A miracle behind you does not automatically feed you today. Faith is not a store of supplies laid up out of past kindnesses. It is a fresh trust, needed again each morning. And God knew that about His people, and He knows it about you. And He was not angry with them for being thirsty. And Moses did the one thing that always helps, whatever the trouble is. He cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet. A tree cast into bitter water, and the water turned sweet. It did not require a new sea, a new miracle on the grand scale of the crossing behind them. It required only that Moses bring the small, present trouble to God, and let Him show the simple thing that would heal it, and said, "If thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt do that which is right in His sight, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee, the Lord that healeth thee." Not only the God who delivers from great danger, but the God who sweetens bitter water and heals the small daily wounds too. Some bitterness cannot be taken out of a life. It can only be sweetened. Perhaps you are carrying a situation tonight that is not going to change, and what you need is not escape from it, but something added to it that makes it drinkable. That is what God did at those waters. He did not empty the pool. He put something into it. From that bitter water, the people came soon after to a resting place of unexpected abundance. And they came to Elim, where were 12 wells of water, and 70 and 10 palm trees. And they encamped there by the waters. After the bitterness of Marah, wells enough for a whole nation, and shade enough to rest beneath. God so often leads His people through one hard, dry stretch directly into a season of quiet plenty, and it can be tempting to forget the bitterness the moment the sweetness comes. But both were His provision, the healing water and the abundant wells alike, and both deserve to be remembered with equal gratitude. Not long after, hunger replaced thirst as the pressing need, and God's answer came with the ordinary rhythm of every single morning. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoar frost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, "It is manna," for they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, "This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat, bread that simply appeared with the morning dew, small and plain and utterly sufficient, exactly where the day before there had been nothing at all. It asked nothing of the people, but that they rise and gather it, fresh, every single morning." It is worth sitting a moment with the strangeness of that name. They called the bread, "What is it?" because they did not recognize the thing that was feeding them. God's provision does not always arrive looking like provision. It comes in an unexpected shape, through a person you would never have chosen, at a time when you had already stopped hoping for it. And it can take a long while to understand what you are holding. Look back over your own life for a moment as you lie here. There may be more of this bread in it than you noticed while you were gathering. And they gathered it every morning, every man according to his eating. And when the sun waxed hot, it melted every morning, not once, not enough to store away and forget about, but new again with every sunrise, melting away by midday, so that no one could hoard tomorrow's portion inside today. It is the same daily rhythm woven all through this story, provision measured out precisely to the day, never more, never less, teaching a whole wandering nation to trust the God who fed them one morning at a time, rather than the size of whatever pile they had managed to gather for themselves. That melting was a mercy, though it can hardly have felt like one. It meant nobody could build a wall of tomorrow around themselves and stop looking up. It meant the whole camp had to keep receiving every day from the same open hand. We spend a great deal of our strength trying to get far enough ahead that we will not need anything from anyone, and it never quite works. And underneath the tiredness of it, there's often a quiet fear of depending on somebody else. Tonight, you are allowed to depend. The morning will bring what the morning brings, and it will be enough, and He will be the one who brings it. And later, when even water ran short again among the dry rocks, God met that need too, in a way that must have felt almost too plain to believe. Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Water out of solid rock, drawn out by one plain, obedient act, with God Himself standing there upon it. Whatever feels most unyielding in your own life tonight, the hardest, driest, most rock-like part of your circumstances, the same God who brought water from stone has not lost the power to do it again. Let your body rest now, the way that thirsty camp finally rested, fed, watered, and kept, one ordinary morning at a time. Underneath every one of these daily provisions was a single, constant, visible sign that never once left the camp, not for a single day or a single night across the whole of that long wilderness journey. It is easy to focus on the dramatic moments of this story, the parted sea, the water from the rock, and forget the quieter miracle that simply never stopped. We are trained to notice change, the sudden thing, the answer that finally arrives, the moment everything turns. Constancy is much harder to see because it does not announce itself and it never varies. And yet the constant things are what hold a life together. A roof, a heartbeat, a person who has simply always been there. The pillar over that camp was the least dramatic wonder in the whole of the journey, and by far the most important. And if you have been waiting for God to do something remarkable in your life, it may be worth asking first what He has never once stopped doing. From the very first steps out of Egypt, God gave His people a visible sign of His nearness that they never had to wonder about or search for. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. By day a cloud, cool and shading against the desert heat. By night, fire, warm and bright against the desert cold. Whatever the hour, whatever the need of that particular hour, the sign changed shape to meet it, and yet it was always underneath the very same faithful presence leading the way. That is worth noticing about God. He meets the hour you are actually in, not the one you were in last season. What comforted you a year ago may not be what you need now, and He is not limited to one way of being kind. The form changes, the nearness does not. Whatever you need Him to be tonight, shade or light, quiet or company, He is already that. There is something tender in the timing of it. The cloud came for the daytime, when what they needed was shade and a direction to walk. God has always been attentive to what the hour requires. In the daylight of your life, He gives what daylight needs, and in the night hours, which are these hours, He gives what night needs, which is almost never an explanation and almost always a warm and steady light to fall asleep beside. And this presence was not occasional or unpredictable. It was constant, steady, never once withdrawn, even for a single day of that long journey. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night, from before the people, not one day, not one night. To every fear, every complaint, every stumble and grumble and doubt that rose up among that wandering people. The pillar never once left its place before them. It is a remarkable, quiet faithfulness, offered not because the people had earned it, but simply because God had promised to go with them, and He kept that promise every single hour. Sit with that a moment, because it is the heart of the whole night. Not because they had earned it, they had not, and the story is honest about how often they complained and doubted and wished themselves back in the country they had been rescued from. The pillar stayed anyway. God's faithfulness has never been a response to our performance. It is simply what He is like. 40 years is a very long time to keep a promise without a single lapse. Think of how many nights that is, one after another, in country that all looks the same, among a people who mostly did not thank Him for it. There's no record anywhere in the story of that light failing. Not once during a complaint, not once during a rebellion, not once through the long, dull stretches when nothing at all seemed to be happening. That is the kind of faithfulness standing over your own life tonight. Whether or not you happen to be able to see it from where you are lying, picture for a moment what it must have meant to lie down at night in an unfamiliar wilderness and lift your eyes to see that fire still standing there, exactly where it had stood the night before. No watch had to be kept for it. No one had to tend it or feed it or worry it would go out before dawn. It simply was a fixed, faithful point of light in a shifting, uncertain landscape. The one thing in the whole of that wandering life that never once changed. Think of what that would do to a person's sleep. To lift the tent flap at some uneasy hour, half awake and unsure of nearly everything, and to see it standing there, exactly as it had been. Nothing to arrange, nothing to check on, only a light that had not gone out, and therefore permission to lie back down. Most of us have some version of that in our lives, if we look for it. A person who has always answered, a verse that has been there since childhood, a quiet certainty that has survived every argument we have ever had with it. These are not accidents of temperament. They are the shape God's constancy takes in an ordinary life, and they are meant to do for you exactly what the pillar did for that camp, which is to let you stop keeping watch. You are not the one holding all of this together. You never were, and it has held anyway. There is something worth carrying from this into your own night tonight. Whatever unfamiliar wilderness your own life may be passing through just now. You may not see a visible pillar standing over your bed, but the same faithfulness that never once left that camp, not for a single day across 40 long years, has not grown less constant in all the centuries since. He goes before you still, shading what is too hot to bear alone, and lighting what is too dark to walk through unaided, changing shape to meet whatever hour you are in, without ever once changing character. He has not looked away from you during this hard stretch. He has not been drawn off by more urgent people. The absence of a visible sign is not the absence of His attention, and the years you feel you have spent walking in circles have been walked in company the whole time. By morning, the same pillar stood there still, its fire settled back into cloud, ready to lead again through the heat of another day. This was the rhythm of the whole wilderness years, cloud and fire trading places with the turning of the light, and underneath both, one unbroken presence that asked only to be followed, one ordinary day at a time. Let this be part of what settles you toward sleep tonight, the picture of a light that never leaves its post, standing watch over you, the way it stood watch over that whole weary, wandering camp, every single night, without exception. So let the last thought from this movement be simple and steady, a light that stays, not flaring, not fading, not needing anything at all from you, only there, above the tents, above the sleeping and the restless alike, keeping its post until morning. You may close your eyes underneath it. In time, the people came to the mountain. The pillar had been leading them toward all along, and there God drew close enough to speak audibly. We will pass over this part gently, the way you might pass a bright window on a quiet street, glancing rather than staring, because what matters most for tonight is not the mountain's great power, but the simple words spoken from within it. There is a way of reading scripture that belongs to the daytime, when you want to understand and to weigh and to work a thing through. And there is a way that belongs to the night, when you simply let the words go by and let a few of them stay. We are doing the second thing now. You do not have to hold on to any of this. Let most of it move past you like weather, and let whatever wants to stay, stay. The mountain was wrapped that morning in cloud, and a great stillness beneath it, holy in a way the camp had never felt before. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire. We will not linger on the weight of that scene, only note that God had come down visibly to be near His people, wrapped in the very cloud that had led them safely this far. It is a comfort if you sit with it. The cloud that frightened them at the mountain was the same cloud that had been shading them for weeks. Nothing new had arrived. They were simply seeing, for a few moments, how much power had been quietly walking beside them the whole time. Moses himself was called up into that quiet, cloud-wrapped nearness, further than anyone else was permitted to go. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai, on the top of the mount. And the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mount, and Moses went up. He climbed alone into the very cloud that had frightened everyone else back to the foot of the mountain, because somewhere inside every deep fear of God there's also an invitation, quiet and personal, to come nearer rather than to stay away. Not everyone accepted that invitation. Most of them stayed at the bottom, and God did not shame them for it. But the one who climbed did not find at the top what he had feared. He found a voice and conversation, and a God who wanted to be known. Reverence and welcome have never been opposites. There is a pattern running through this whole story that is worth noticing as we come toward its quietest part. God keeps coming down. He came down to a basket in the reeds. He came down to a bush in the backside of the desert. He came down onto a mountain, and he would come down again to the door of a plain tent. Nowhere in the entire account does anyone climb their own way up to him first. The movement is always from his side toward ours, and that is still the direction it runs tonight. You are not required to reach him. He is the one who comes down. And from within that cloud, God spoke words meant not only for Moses, but for every heart that would ever hear them read aloud, then and now. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Before any commandment about how to live, he first reminded them simply of who he was and what he had already done. The God who brought them out, the God who had already proven himself faithful before he asked anything of them at all. Every instruction that followed was built on that one foundation, already laid, already secure. It is easy to hear a command as a demand and to brace against it, but hear the order of the things he said. First the rescue, then the instruction. He did not tell them to keep his words so that he would bring them out. He told them he had already brought them out, and then showed them how free people live. Everything he asks of you rests on something he has already done for you, and it always has. You are not being asked tonight to earn a place you have already been given. And Moses went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount, and the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days, and the 7th day he called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud. 6 quiet days of waiting before the call. Came 6 days of a mountain simply covered and still, holding its holiness without hurry. God is not often in a rush to speak. He lets the cloud settle, lets the stillness deepen, and calls when the moment is fully ready, rather than the moment we might have chosen ourselves. 6 days of nothing is a long wait when you are the one waiting. There's no record of what Moses did up there in the quiet before the call finally came. Probably very little. Probably he simply stayed. Waiting on God is not wasted time, and it is very often the part of the whole process where the most is happening inside us. Perhaps the waiting was itself the point. A person cannot come straight out of the noise of a camp into the presence of God and hear anything properly. Something has to settle first. The dust of the day has to come down out of the air. That is happening to you now, in this room, as the sentences slow and the hour gets later, and there's nothing at all to hurry about it. Let the settling take exactly as long as it takes. And Moses went into the midst of the cloud and gat him up into the mount. And Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days inside that quiet cloud, near enough to God to receive everything that would shape the rest of the story. It is worth noticing, as this movement closes, how much of this whole story has unfolded inside cloud and quiet rather than noise and spectacle. A mountain wrapped in stillness, a man climbing alone into it, and a God who was there the entire time, closer than the thunder made him seem. Let your own thoughts rest now inside that same kind of quiet, the noise of the day settling like cloud around a mountain, finally at peace. There is nothing left in this part of the story to work out, only quiet and a man inside it, and a God who was never as far off as the thunder had made him sound. Let your breathing go long and slow now, and let the mountain be still, and we will go on very gently from here. After the mountain, God gave his people a smaller, more ordinary place where his nearness could keep meeting them. A plain tent set apart from the camp, simple enough to be moved and pitched again with every stopping place, and yet holy enough that his presence would visibly come and rest there. There is comfort in the smallness of it. After the fire and the trumpet and the shaking mountain, God chose cloth and poles, something a person could walk to, something that could be taken down and carried and set up again in the next place. If the great and overwhelming picture of God is hard to rest inside tonight, stay with this one instead. He is willing to be met in plain places. He has always seemed to prefer the plain places, and he has never needed a grand setting in order to be near. Moses set this tent apart from the noise and business of the camp, a deliberate distance meant to protect its quiet. And Moses took the tabernacle and pitched it without the camp, afar off from the camp, and called it the Tabernacle of the congregation, afar off from the camp. Sometimes nearness to God is found exactly there, a little apart from the crowd and its constant noise, a place set aside on purpose for meeting him without distraction. You have one of those places tonight, whether or not you have ever thought of it that way. This room, this hour, nothing is required of you here. The whole camp of the day has been left on the other side of the door, and there is nothing at all you must accomplish before the light goes out. Whenever Moses walked toward that tent, the whole camp paused to watch him go, as though something in them understood the weight of where he was headed. And it came to pass, when Moses went out unto the tabernacle, that all the people rose up and stood every man at his tent door and looked after Moses until he was gone into the tabernacle. They did not follow him in. They simply watched and waited and let him go alone into the place where God had promised to meet him. There is a kind of reverence in that watching, a recognition that some meetings with God are not meant to be crowded. and notice that they waited for him. Nobody wandered off. The camp simply stood in its doorways until he had gone inside. There is a quiet dignity in being still on somebody else's behalf. And if you have carried another person's need to God tonight, that is exactly what you have been doing. And what happened next confirmed every single time that the meeting was real. And it came to pass, as Moses entered into the tabernacle, the cloudy pillar descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Lord talked with Moses. The very same pillar that had led the whole camp through the wilderness would come down personally and rest at the door of that one small tent, so that everyone watching could see, unmistakably, that God himself had arrived to meet with his servant. Consider how ordinary this had become. The tent went up in every new place. Moses walked out to it. The pillar came down. It happened again and again, until it was simply part of how that camp lived. Nearness to God is not usually a single dramatic event. It is a habit, built out of small returns to the same quiet place, until one day you notice that meeting him has become the most familiar thing in your life. And all the people saw the cloudy pillar stand at the tabernacle door, and all the people rose up and worshipped, every man in his tent door. From a distance, without being able to hear a single word exchanged inside, the whole camp worshipped simply because they could see that God had come near. And the Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh unto his friend. Face to face, as a man speaketh unto his friend. Not distant, not formal, not held at arm's length, but close, familiar, the kind of nearness usually reserved for the oldest and dearest of friendships. Friend is a startling word for it. Not servant, though he was one. Not prophet, though he was that too. Friend. The God who had filled a mountain with fire spoke to a man the way you would speak across a table to somebody you have known for years. And that is the register in which he is willing to be near to you as well. If prayer has felt like work lately, let that one sentence loosen something in you. You are not filing a report. You are not required to find the correct words or to arrange your thoughts in the proper order before you are allowed to speak. Say it the way you would say it to a friend at the end of a very long day, plainly, half finished, in whatever state it is honestly in. That is the kind of talking this tent was made for. That same tent and the greater tabernacle that would later be built to hold it carried this pattern forward long after Moses himself was gone. Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation, because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. There were even moments when the glory was too full, too near, for even Moses himself to enter, a holiness so complete it could only be received, never rushed or forced. There is a rest in being kept outside a thing you could not have handled anyway. We so often want the full understanding, the whole view, every question answered before we will consent to lie down. But some things are simply too much for us, and God's kindness in that moment is not to explain, but to fill the room and let us stand quietly at the edge of it. You do not have to comprehend Him tonight in order to be near Him. Standing at the door is enough. And when the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud were not taken up, then they journeyed not till the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and the fire was on it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel, throughout all their journeys. Every step of that whole long wandering, forward or resting, was set by the movement of that one visible presence, and the people learned slowly and patiently to let His timing govern their own. Let that same patient trust settle over your own night tonight, resting until the moment He calls you onward, and not one moment before. There is a freedom in that, if you can receive it. You are not behind, you are not late. If nothing has moved yet, then it is simply not time yet, and the waiting is not a failure of yours. Inside that same tent of meeting, in one of the tenderest conversations recorded anywhere in Scripture, Moses asked God for the one thing he could not bear to go forward without. And God's answer to him is the very word this whole night has been resting on. Let it settle over you again now, slowly, the way it was first spoken. Everything in this night has been walking toward this one sentence. The basket among the reeds, the long years with the flock, the bush that would not burn away, the marked door, the sea, the bread lying on the ground at dawn, the light standing above the tents. All of it was God being present over and over, in one form after another, among people who could not always tell that He was there. And now He says it out loud, in the plainest words in the whole story, to a man who needed badly to hear it, and to you, who perhaps needed it just as much. Moses had led this people a long way already, through the sea and the wilderness and the mountain, and still he came before God with an honest, almost anxious request. And Moses said unto the Lord, See, thou sayest unto me, Bring up this people, and thou hast not let me know whom thou wilt send with me. Yet thou hast said, I know thee by name, and thou hast also found grace in my sight. Even after everything he had already witnessed, Moses still needed to hear it plainly, still needed the reassurance that he would not be asked to go forward alone. There's no rebuke in the story for that. God did not tell him. He ought to have known better by now. Faith is not a thing you achieve once and then keep in a drawer. It is asked for again with every new stretch of road, and needing to hear the promise a second time is not a weakness in you. It is simply what it is like to be a person. He pressed further, asking not for power or success, but simply to know God more closely and to be certain of His nearness. Now therefore, I pray thee, If I have found grace in thy sight, show me now thy way, that I may know thee, that I may find grace in thy sight, and consider that this nation is thy people. Show me now thy way, that I may know thee. Not a request for a plan, but a request for a person, for the assurance of relationship underneath every task still waiting to be done. Most of us pray for the plan. We want to know what is going to happen, and when, and how it will turn out in the end. But a plan, even a very good one, cannot keep you company. Only a person can do that. And when Moses asked for the deeper thing, God gave it to him, and gave the rest besides. And God's answer came, simple and complete. The very heart of the whole promise this night is carried from its first words. And he said, My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. Not a map, not a guarantee that the road ahead would be easy. Just presence and just rest offered together, because presence is very often the only thing that makes rest possible at all. Notice that rest is what the promise ends on, not victory, not a shortened road or an easier assignment or any guarantee that the people would behave themselves. Rest. God knew what the man standing in front of him was actually running out of, and it was not courage, and it was not ability. It was the plain capacity to keep going. So that is what he offered him. If you have been asking for a solution, and what you most need is rest, you are in very good company, and the offer has not changed since. Moses received that promise and immediately staked everything on it, unwilling to take even one more step without it. And he said unto him, If thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence. He would rather stay exactly where he was than move forward without God beside him. And there is a wisdom in that refusal worth carrying into your own life. Progress without his presence is not really progress at all. Better to remain still in the presence of God than to rush ahead alone. It is a strange kind of ambition to want God more than you want to get somewhere, but it is the only ambition that ends in rest. Every other kind keeps you moving. This one lets you stop, because if his presence was the thing you were after, then you already have what you came for, right here in the dark, doing nothing at all. Think of how much of your own tiredness has come from moving without him. The decisions made in a hurry, the stretches you got through on nothing but effort and will. It is possible to accomplish a great deal that way and to arrive somewhere hollow. Moses had already tried that approach once, years before, in Egypt, in his own strength, and it had cost him everything he had. He was not going to try it a second time. Neither do you have to. For wherein shall it be known here that I and thy people have found grace in thy sight? Is it not in that thou goest with us? So shall we be separated, I and thy people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth. It was God's presence and nothing else that set this people apart from every other people on earth. Not their strength, not their numbers, simply that he walked among them, visibly, faithfully, day after day. And the Lord said unto Moses, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by name. The promise was given plainly and completely, and it was never taken back. He knows your name too, not your role, not the version of you that other people manage to see, but you, the actual person lying here at the end of this particular day. That is what the whole long story has been quietly saying from its very first page. God noticed one baby among the reeds. God noticed one shepherd on an ordinary hillside that nobody was watching. God notices you tonight with nothing accomplished and nothing to show for the hours, and He calls that enough to be going on with. That same promise is the one carried into this very room tonight, spoken first to a tired leader who could not face one more mile without it, and offered now to you, just as fully, just as completely. My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. You do not have to solve tomorrow before you are allowed to rest tonight. You only have to receive the presence already offered, and let the rest that was promised to Moses be promised in this same breath to you. The story of Moses goes on from here, through more years and more wilderness than any one night could hold, and it ends at last with an old man standing on a high place, looking out over a promise he would not walk into himself. But he was never once alone in any of it. That was the whole of what he had asked for, and the whole of what he was given, and it was enough for a lifetime. And now this night has come around to its last quiet words, and so the story lays itself down, and you may lay yourself down with it. Moses wrote a psalm of his own, late in his life, after all that wilderness was behind him, and it opens on the very thing this night has been about. Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God, a dwelling place, not somewhere he finally arrived, but a home he had been living inside the whole way through. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. The days are few, and they go by quickly, and tonight that is not a sorrow, but a reason to let this one go gently, finished or unfinished, and simply lie down. O satisfy us early with thy mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Let the morning bring you mercy first, before anything else has a chance to speak. And let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish thou the work of our hands upon us. Yea, the work of our hands establish thou it. Whatever you manage today, small as it may look to you from here, is not lost. He establishes the work of tired hands, and the promise that has carried this whole night is standing over you still, unchanged and unhurried. My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. So receive now the oldest blessing of all, spoken over God's people in that same wilderness. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee, and give thee peace. This whole devotional is waiting on Spotify as well, if you would like it beside you again another night. There's nothing left for you to do tonight. His presence goes with you into the dark, and the rest he promised is already yours. Let your eyes close now and be at peace